The bank's parking garage lights flickered, casting long shadows as Chad Kincaid's fingers lingered on Sarah's shoulder. "Tom, isn't it? Your wife and I were just discussing her performance review." My knuckles whitened. Sarah recoiled, her face a mask of practiced professionalism, but her eyes held a desperate plea. Chad's smirk widened. "We're not done until I say we're done." The air turned to ice. The fluorescent light in the bank's underground parking garage hummed, an indifferent witness. It cast a sickly yellow glow on the concrete pillars and the two figures before me. Chad Kincaid's hand rested on Sarah Miller's shoulder, his thumb stroking the fabric of her tailored jacket. The gesture was possessive, a casual dominance. My own hands clenched at my sides. "Get your hands off her, or I swear to God I'll end you right here," I said. My voice flatter than I expected, but with an edge I hoped he would understand. The stale air held the scent of exhaust and damp concrete. Chad turned his head slowly. A smirk played at the corner of his mouth, a practiced insolence. His eyes, though, were sharp, calculating. "Tom, isn't it? Your wife and I were just discussing her performance review." He didn't remove his hand. Sarah shifted, a subtle movement, but I saw the tension radiate from her. Her professional mask, usually impenetrable, was stretched thin. Her gaze met mine, a quick, silent plea. Then she pulled away from Chad, a deliberate step back, creating space. "We're done here," she said, her voice even, controlled. It was a statement, not a question. Chad's eyes narrowed, the smirk hardening. "We're not done until I say we're done, Sarah. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow in private." He didn't look at me when he said it, his words aimed solely at her, a reaffirmation of his power. It was then, watching Sarah's momentary flicker of defeat, feeling the cold fury rise in my own chest, that a hard resolve solidified. That moment in the dim, stale air of the parking garage, I knew I would destroy Chad Kincaid. 3 years earlier, New York City had offered a different kind of promise. Sarah and I lived in a comfortable brownstone apartment in Brooklyn, the kind of place where the stoop felt like a small claim on the American dream. We were building something, brick by brick. Manhattan was where Sarah spent her days, a shining tower of ambition and intellect. She was a brilliant economics major, straight out of a top university, and had quickly climbed the ranks at J.P. Morgan. Senior account manager at 29, a genuine rising star. Her mind worked in complex algorithms and market fluctuations, a world I admired but never fully understood. My own work was a quieter affair. I ran a small marketing consultancy from a spare room, helping local businesses craft their stories. It paid the bills, allowed for a decent life, and left room for the future we discussed late at night. A house with a yard, maybe a child or two. We were content, carving out our piece of the city, feeling like we had beaten the odds. Then Chad Kincaid arrived at J.P. Morgan. Sarah first mentioned him over dinner, picking at a salad she barely touched after a long day. "They've brought in a hotshot from Goldman Sachs," she said, her tone a mix of weary respect and mild apprehension. Chad Kincaid replaced Gary Stevens. Gary had been her mentor, a decent man close to retirement, known for his steady hand and quiet wisdom. His departure had been abrupt. Sarah explained Chad was a human hurricane, notorious for turning around underperforming divisions. A miracle worker, she called him, though the words felt heavy in her mouth. I looked up from my plate. "But your division isn't underperforming," I pointed out, a simple observation based on the numbers she often shared, the bonuses she sometimes received. "It's one of the most profitable." She gave me a look then, a quick, cynical glance I had come to recognize as her Wall Street look. It spoke of unspoken rules, of power plays, of a game played far beyond the simple metrics of profit and loss. It was a look that said, "You just don't understand how things work here." A month later, I finally met Chad Kincaid. The bank's holiday party was held in a rented ballroom downtown, all glittering chandeliers and hushed conversations. Sarah had warned me, her words a quiet prelude to the man himself. "Custom suits, tailored in Italy," she'd said, "and he parks that bright red Porsche 911 Turbo S right out front, like a declaration." And there he was, moving through the crowd like a shark in a school of fish. He was taller than I'd expected, with broad shoulders that strained the expensive fabric of his charcoal suit. He didn't just walk, he strode, a confident, almost predatory gait. He dominated conversations, his voice carrying above the general murmur. I watched him from across the room, leaning against a pillar with a glass of lukewarm champagne. He'd laugh too loudly at his own jokes, a booming sound that made heads turn. Then he'd drop names like Currency, Goldman, Blackstone, the guys at Davos. I overheard him tell a small group, Kincaid sees opportunities where others merely see obstacles. The phrase hung in the air, a self-congratulatory motto. Sarah, radiant in a simple black dress that somehow made every other woman seem overdressed, was beside me. She caught my eye, a slight tilt of her head signaling Chad was making his way towards us. He approached, his gaze sweeping over Sarah first, a quick, assessing glance that seemed to take in every detail of her dress, her posture, her overall presentation. Then his eyes flicked to me, a momentary pause, as if he were trying to place me, or perhaps dismiss me, before he decided. "The talented Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice smooth, reaching for Sarah's hand. He held it a beat too long, his thumb stroking the back of her hand lightly before releasing it. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "And you must be the husband I've heard so little about." "And Tom Anderson," I supplied, extending my hand. His grip was immediate and crushing, a deliberate display of strength that bordered on painful. I met his gaze steadily, refusing to flinch. He didn't acknowledge my name. Instead, he waved a dismissive hand, a casual flick of the wrist. "Tom sells ads or something, right?" It wasn't a question, but a statement designed to diminish. Before I could respond, Chad turned his full attention back to Sarah. "The Larson Group called today," he said, his voice dropping slightly, making it sound like confidential information. "They're considering increasing their portfolio substantially. I'm thinking you should take lead on that." Sarah's eyes lit up. The Larson Group was a major player, a career maker, the kind of account that cemented reputations. "That's fantastic," she said, a genuine excitement breaking through her composed exterior. Chad nodded, his gaze still fixed on her. "I was thinking we should meet them for dinner first. Iron out the details, lay the groundwork. I made reservations for Friday at Daniel, just you and me with Larson and his CFO." The words "just you and me" hit me like a small, sharp stone in the gut. It was proprietary, an immediate exclusion. Sarah beside me tensed. I felt it, a subtle stiffening of her arm. She managed a professional smile. "Sounds good, Chad. I'll clear my calendar." He gave her a knowing look, then, without another word, turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving a faint scent of expensive cologne in his wake. "This guy makes my skin crawl," I whispered, my voice tight. Sarah let out a small, almost imperceptible sigh. "You're telling me," she murmured, her eyes distant, scanning the room but not really seeing it. "He pulls this trick with everyone. It's like a power play. Remember Gary Stevens? Chad called him into his office, and Gary said Chad just stared at his chest the entire time he spoke. Said it was about establishing dominance." For the first 2 months, Chad Kincaid's leadership was, undeniably, brilliant. Sarah's division, already strong, somehow surged forward. Her visibility within senior management grew with each passing week. Her name was mentioned in hushed tones, always followed by Kincaid's protege, or "she's on the fast track." Her workload nearly doubled, the hours stretching longer, but she was included in meetings she'd only dreamed of attending before. Boardroom discussions, strategic planning sessions, direct access to the firm's top brass. "Maybe I misjudged him," Sarah admitted one night, curled on the sofa, a half-eaten bowl of ice cream on the coffee table. The city lights twinkled outside our window. "He's intense, demanding, but he knows his stuff. He gets results." Her voice held a note of grudging respect, mixed with the exhaustion that now seemed to cling to her like a second skin. Then came the late-night texts. At first they were sporadic, a quick question about a report, a last-minute schedule change for the next day. Always work-related, always professional in their wording. But the timing began to shift. 11 o'clock p.m. became midnight. Midnight became 1 o'clock a.m. Her phone would buzz softly on the nightstand, pulling her from sleep, pulling me from sleep. "Can't this wait until morning?" I asked one Tuesday, watching her fingers fly across the screen, the blue light illuminating her tired face. It was almost 1:30 a.m. She didn't look up. "Welcome to Wall Street, Tom. The markets never sleep. Chad expects immediate responses. Her tone was clipped, the kind of sharpness that comes from relentless pressure. Next were the closed-door meetings. They started innocently enough, just a quick debrief after a client call, then they stretched. Everyone else would pack up, the office lights would dim, but Sarah and Chad would remain. Her text would come an hour or two later. Still in meeting, don't wait up. I'd eat dinner alone, watch television by myself, the quiet of the apartment growing heavier with each passing minute. The vague unease started to settle in. Then came the business trips. They were frequent now, major clients scattered across the country. Sarah was indispensable. Chad made sure she was on every itinerary. The hotel arrangements would sometimes shift at the last minute. He changed the room block, she'd explain over a crackly phone line from Chicago or San Francisco. Said it was more convenient for us to have adjacent rooms. Less time wasted getting ready for meetings. Adjacent rooms, not sharing, but close enough that the walls felt thin, the distance permeable. Sarah handled it all with a meticulous professional grace. She maintained her boundaries, never overtly complaining, always delivering exceptional work. She'd explain away the late nights, the close quarters, the constant demands as just part of the price of success in a cutthroat industry. She was good at her job, fiercely competent, and that competence seemed to be her shield, her defense against whatever subtle currents ran beneath the surface. But Chad Kincaid was used to getting what he wanted. He was a man who saw no obstacles, only opportunities. And he was slowly, methodically pushing the limits, testing the strength of that professional shield. The increasing unease settled over our quiet Brooklyn evenings, a shadow lengthening in our apartment, making the silence feel less like peace and more like a waiting. 3 months into Chad's tenure, Sarah came home unusually late. The apartment was dark except for the glow of the streetlights filtering through the window. I had been reading, waiting for her. Her face was tight, drawn, a controlled anger etched around her mouth. The moment she stepped inside, she didn't bother with her usual routine of setting down her bag or kicking off her heels. She went straight to the kitchen, pulled a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon from the rack, and poured herself a generous glass, the crimson liquid swirling. "Per se," she announced, not looking at me, her voice clipped. "A private dinner at Per se." "Yeah, I say, to discuss my career trajectory." She took a long, slow sip of the wine. I watched her, a knot tightening in my stomach. Per se wasn't where you discussed career trajectories with your boss unless it was something extraordinary. And what did he say about this trajectory? She finally turned, her eyes flashing. Apparently it involves wearing more revealing clothes and accompanying him to a client retreat in the Hamptons this weekend. Just him, me, and a couple of key clients. The sarcasm in her voice was thick enough to cut. My stomach clenched. "Tell me you're not going." She scoffed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "Of course I'm not going, Tom. Do you think I'm insane?" She took another gulp of wine. "I told him I had commitments, personal commitments." "And what did he say to that?" She mimicked his deep, smooth voice, a parody of false concern. "Your commitment should be to your career, Sarah. Personal sacrifices are necessary for exceptional rewards." That's what he said. "Bastard," I muttered, the word tasting sour. Sarah nodded, a grim agreement. Then, she continued, her voice dropping, almost a whisper. "He put his hand on my knee under the table. Just rested it there, like he owned it." She shivered, though the apartment was warm. "And he told me a vice president position was opening up. Perfect for me, if I showed proper dedication to the team." My face went hot, a flush of anger rising from my chest. "That's textbook sexual harassment, Sarah. You need to report him." The words felt inadequate, hollow against the weight of what she was telling me. Her laugh was bitter, humorless. "To whom exactly, Tom?" "HR reports to the executive committee. The executive committee reports to the CEO. And Chad Kincaid plays golf with the CEO every Sunday morning. They're practically best friends." She ran a hand through her hair, frustration palpable. "You think they'll believe me over him? A hotshot who's pulling in record numbers?" She shook her head. "This isn't new, Tom. It's Wall Street." I've been told I'm surprisingly good with numbers for a woman more times than I can count. I've had clients pat my head, tell me I'm cute before a major presentation. It's always there, humming beneath the surface. Then quit, I urged her, the words jumping out before I could fully think them through. The thought of her staying, enduring this, was unbearable. Sarah looked at me, her eyes firm, resolute. No, she said, her voice steady now, the anger hardening into something colder. No, it's about justice, Tom. Why should I be the one to leave? This is my career, my life. He's the one who's doing something wrong. The next day, Sarah walked into the office and respectfully declined Chad's Hamptons invitation, citing family obligations that weekend. Her voice, she told me later, was calm, professional, giving him no opening for argument. His response was immediate, brutal. By noon, the email arrived, copied to several senior managers. Sarah was off the Larson account. Effective immediately, the prestigious, career-making deal was reassigned to a junior associate with far less experience. It was a clear, public demotion. That wasn't all. Her bonus recommendations, usually stellar, were mysteriously revised downward by the end of the week, a quiet but significant blow to her financial standing. Then came the scheduling. Key internal meetings, things crucial for her projects, began to appear on her calendar at the exact time she had unmovable client calls. The conflicts made her look disorganized, unreliable, and disengaged. She'd miss important decisions, then be blamed for not being present. He's trying to make me look incompetent, Sarah said one evening, sinking onto the sofa after her third consecutive 16-hour day. Her face was pale, her eyes bloodshot. The sheer volume of work had increased, yet her influence had diminished. She was drowning, not in incompetence, but in strategic sabotage. When quarterly performance reviews rolled around, Chad's assessment of Sarah was devastating. The usual metrics of her success, client retention, revenue generated, project completion rates, were brushed aside. His written review, sterile and damning, declared she lacks leadership qualities, exhibited inconsistent performance, and requires closer supervision. It was a death sentence for her career at J.P. Morgan, carefully worded to avoid any direct accusations but leaving an undeniable stain. I watched the toll it took on her. The spark in her eyes dimmed, replaced by a constant weariness. She stopped laughing as easily. Our quiet evenings, once filled with shared stories and comfortable silence, now held a heavy tension. Her refusal to back down, her fierce sense of justice, was costing her everything. Then we fight, I said one night, pulling her close. Her body felt fragile in my arms. But we do it smart. We don't play his game by his rules. I started spending my nights differently. My marketing work took a back seat. Instead, I sat at my desk, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the dark apartment, digging. I researched Chad Kincaid. Every public record, every professional profile, every obscure financial forum. I looked for any crack in the polished facade, any weakness, any hint of past transgressions. I found whispers, rumors of aggressive tactics at previous firms, a sudden departure from Goldman Sachs under vague circumstances, an executive assistant who left abruptly after a short tenure. There were vague online comments about his management style being intense, but nothing concrete, nothing that would stand up in an official report, nothing that would justify a formal complaint. Just smoke, no fire. A quiet desperation settled in our apartment. The conventional paths, the righteous paths, were blocked. We were up against a man who knew how to operate in the shadows, how to wound without leaving a mark. It made me wonder, how far would a man go to protect his wife, to reclaim her dignity? Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Frustrated by the endless dead ends, by the neatly closed doors of legitimate recourse, I started to explore less conventional options. The memory of Chad's smirk in the parking garage, his dismissive hand gesture, his casual cruelty fueled a cold, hard resolve within me. Sarah was being systematically dismantled, and the law, the HR department, the entire corporate structure offered no real path to justice. I made a few discreet inquiries, reaching out to old contacts from my wilder college days, people who had drifted into the grayer areas of business. I hinted at a need for leverage against a powerful, untouchable figure, someone who operated above the law, a man who thought he was invincible. The conversations were veiled, coded, but the message was understood. This path led me, eventually, to a man known only as the Fixer. We met in a dimly lit bar in a forgotten corner of the financial district, the kind of place where deals were made in whispers, not on paper. He was a small man, unremarkable in appearance, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. He promised results, his voice raspy, but the cost, though never explicitly stated, hung in the air between us, heavy and unspoken. I laid out the situation, stripping away the corporate jargon. Chad's protection, his connections, the systemic nature of his abuse, the sheer injustice of it all. I explained how he had undermined Sarah's career, how he had humiliated her, not with overt violence, but with a slow, grinding psychological torment. The Fixer listened, his face impassive, occasionally nodding. When I first broached the idea with Sarah, she was horrified. We were sitting in our living room, the city lights shimmering beyond the window, but her face was pale in the soft lamplight. "Tom, we can't. This isn't us," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. "We don't do things like this. We're not devils. Chad has already dragged us into a world where the rules don't apply, Sarah," I argued, my own voice tight with suppressed anger. "He won't be stopped by good intentions, by polite complaints. He's untouchable through conventional means. What other choice do we have? Watch him destroy you?" The argument stretched over days, a slow, agonizing discussion that wore us both down. She saw the relentless sabotage of her career, the constant stress etching lines around my eyes. She saw the desperation in my actions, born of a need to protect her. Finally, after a long silence one evening, she looked at me, her eyes tired but resolute. "Just be careful, Tom. Don't become him." And it was a plea, a warning, and a reluctant acceptance all at once. The Fixer outlined a plan. It wouldn't be about public accusations or HR complaints. It would be about Chad's financial vulnerabilities. A web of shady investments, undisclosed dealings, offshore accounts, the kind of shadowy empire men like Kincaid often built around their legitimate ones. He promised to expose the rot from within, a subtle unraveling of Chad's carefully constructed world. The deal was made. Information for leverage. A quiet dismantling. As I walked out of that bar, the city's neon lights reflecting on the wet pavement, I felt a cold dread in my gut, but also a surge of dangerous hope. The fight, the real fight, had just begun. The plan began to unfold with a quiet precision. It started subtly. Whispers of financial irregularities tied to Chad's pet projects began to circulate in the bank's lower echelons. Nothing direct, nothing that could be immediately traced, just enough to catch the attention of an ambitious junior analyst, enough to make a few curious questions bubble up. Anonymous tips, carefully placed, led to internal investigations. First, minor audits of specific transactions, then a broader look into departmental spending. Chad, arrogant and confident in his position, dismissed these initial probes as minor inconveniences, bureaucratic red tape. He maintained his bluster, unaware of the orchestrated attacks slowly chipping away at his reputation and power base from within. He still played golf with the CEO on Sundays, still commanded the room with his loud laugh, but the cracks had started. Then came the more serious accusations. The Fixer had a network, a way of uncovering hidden truths, a pattern of ethical breaches, a trail of bypassed protocols, and the quiet financial benefits Chad had reaped from manipulating the system. The evidence wasn't a smoking gun in the traditional sense, but a series of precise, undeniable facts that exposed a clear abuse of power. It wasn't about Sarah directly anymore. It was about Chad Kincaid's deep-seated corruption, carefully laid bare. The climax arrived not with a bang, but with a series of muffled thuds. The internal investigations escalated, becoming a full-blown internal review. The CEO, once Chad's golf buddy, couldn't ignore the mounting evidence, the growing pressure from compliance officers. Chad Kincaid was publicly disgraced. Rumors swept through the bank, then the financial press, hushed reports about unethical conduct, and violations of company policy. He faced investigations, a forced resignation that was spun as pursuing other opportunities, and the irreversible collapse of his carefully constructed career. Sarah and I watched his downfall from a distance, through news reports and the quiet chatter from her few remaining allies at the bank. There was no joy in it, only a hollow victory. The anger that had fueled me, the righteous indignation that had driven Sarah, had been replaced by a lingering exhaustion, a quiet ache. Then came the final call from the fixer. His voice was as flat and even as it had been on our first meeting. "It's done," he said. "He's gone." But then came the veiled demand. "There will be a time, Tom, when I'll call on you. A favor. You owe me. Not money, not a specific task, just a lingering debt, a shadow that now bound me to the world I had stepped into." I hung up the phone, the silence of the apartment suddenly heavy. We had achieved justice, or at least our version of it. But at what cost? Our integrity felt bruised, our peace of mind fractured. We had fought fire with fire, crossed lines we swore we never would. Our relationship was forever changed, marked by the secrets we shared, the compromises we had made, the darkness we had touched. Sometimes, late at night, I would find Sarah awake, staring out at the city lights. We would sit there in silence, the weight of what we'd done settling between us. The city looked different now, the glittering skyline no longer a symbol of promise, but of a complex, unforgiving world where even justice came with a price. We had won the battle, but the scars, invisible yet deep, would remain. We watched Chad Kincaid's public disgrace from our Brooklyn apartment. The news reports were dry, factual. Executive resigns amidst internal investigation. Unspecified ethical breaches. No mention of Sarah, no hint of the quiet vengeance that had brought him down. The silence between us in those days was thick, weighted. We had achieved what we set out to do, but the triumph felt hollow, a victory won with borrowed tools and stained hands. The fixer's final call was brief. He didn't ask for money, only acknowledged a future debt. It was a lingering shadow, a quiet understanding that our actions had consequences beyond Chad Kincaid's career. Sarah and I rarely spoke of it. The secrets we shared, the compromises we'd made, had etched new lines in our relationship. We were closer in a way, bound by the darkness we'd navigated, but also changed, carrying a knowledge of the lengths we were capable of. Looking out over the city from our window, the lights seemed sharper, the shadows deeper. The quiet ache was always there, a reminder that some battles, once fought, never truly end.